The bitter February wind whistled through the Brookside Marketplace in Tinley Park, Illinois, as shoppers hurried from store to store, seeking refuge from the cold. Among them, a man in a dark jacket and knit cap walked purposefully towards the Lane Bryant store, his eyes scanning the surroundings with calculated precision. Inside, store manager Rhoda McFarland greeted customers with a warm smile, unaware that her life was about to change forever. As the man entered the store, the bell above the door chimed, a stark contrast to the horror that was about to unfold. He approached Rhoda, his voice low and controlled as he asked about a job application. She turned to retrieve the form, and in that moment, everything changed. The man pulled out a gun, his intentions suddenly clear. Rhoda's eyes widened in terror as she realized the grave danger they were all in. With swift, brutal efficiency, he herded Rhoda and 5 other women customers and employees to the back of the store. The women's hearts raced as they were forced to kneel, their minds struggling to comprehend the nightmare unfolding around them. One by one, the shooter bound their wrists behind their backs with duct tape, his movements methodical and emotionless. Rhoda, her voice trembling, tried to reason with him, hoping to appeal to any shred of humanity that might remain. But her pleas fell on deaf ears as the man raised his gun, his finger tightening on the trigger. The first shot rang out, shattering the tense silence. Then another and another. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the metallic tang of blood. As her colleagues fell around her, one woman made a split-second decision that would save her life. She played dead, praying the shooter wouldn't notice her shallow breathing. The gunman, satisfied with his work, fled the scene, leaving behind a tableau of horror that would haunt the community for years to come. Outside, oblivious shoppers continued their day, the sounds of laughter and conversation, a stark contrast to the tragedy hidden within the store's walls. It wasn't until Rhoda's worried fiancé called the store, unable to reach her, that the alarm was raised. The 911 dispatcher's voice cracked as she relayed the chilling message. Shots fired at Lane Bryant, multiple victims down. Detective Ray Violetto was enjoying his day off when the call came in. In an instant, he was racing to the scene, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. As he arrived at the Brookside Marketplace, the flashing lights of police cars and ambulances cast an eerie glow in the fading daylight. Violetto's stomach churned as he entered the store, the sight before him more horrific than anything he'd encountered in his decades on the force. 5 women lay motionless, their lives brutally cut short. But amidst the tragedy, a miracle, one survivor, shaken but alive. As forensics teams combed the scene, Violetto interviewed the survivor, her words painting a chilling picture of the killer's cold efficiency. "He was so calm," she whispered, her eyes haunted, "like he'd done this before." The detective's mind raced. Was this the work of a seasoned killer, or a carefully planned first-time attack? As night fell, Violetto stood outside the store, watching as the bodies of the victims were carefully removed. He made a silent vow to the women and their families. He would not rest until justice was served. In the days that followed, Tinley Park was gripped by fear. The killer was still at large, and every stranger was viewed with suspicion. Violetto and his team worked tirelessly, following every lead, no matter how small. But the killer had been meticulous, leaving few clues behind. The composite sketch of the shooter was plastered across the city, his dark eyes staring out from every street corner and newspaper stand. As weeks turned into months, the case grew cold. But Violetto refused to give up, the faces of the victims haunting his dreams. He retraced the killer's steps countless times, searching for the one detail they might have missed. The store's security cameras had been disabled, but footage from nearby businesses provided tantalizing glimpses of the shooter's escape route. Violetto pored over the grainy images, hoping to spot something, anything that might break the case wide open. As the investigation stretched on, a disturbing theory began to take shape in Violetto's mind. The killer's familiarity with the store's layout, his calm demeanor, could he have been a former employee? This new angle breathed life into the investigation. Violetto and his team began combing through years of employee records, looking for potential suspects. But as each lead turned into another dead end, the weight of the unsolved case bore down on the detective. The families of the victims held vigils, their pain a constant reminder of the justice that remained elusive. Rhoda McFarlane's fiancé, once full of life and love, now walked through his days like a ghost, consumed by grief and unanswered questions. As the first anniversary of the shooting approached, Violetto felt the pressure mounting. The community demanded answers he couldn't provide. He revisited the crime scene, now an empty storefront, the cheerful Lane Bryant sign long since removed. Standing in the spot where 5 lives were so cruelly taken, Violetto closed his eyes, trying to see what he might have missed. And then a breakthrough. A witness came forward with new information. A suspicious vehicle seen leaving the area shortly after the shooting. The description was vague, but it was more than they'd had in months. Violetto felt a glimmer of hope ignite in his chest. As the investigation gained new momentum, the killer watched from the shadows, his dark eyes following every news report. He had thought himself untouchable, but now, for the first time, he felt the icy fingers of fear creeping up his spine. Violetto's team worked around the clock, cross-referencing the new information with their existing evidence. Slowly, painfully, a picture began to emerge, not of a random act of violence, but of a carefully orchestrated plan. The motive remained elusive, but Violetto was convinced they were closing in on the truth. As the net tightened, the killer grew increasingly desperate. He knew it was only a matter of time before his carefully constructed alibi crumbled. In a bold move, Violetto decided to. The response was overwhelming. Tips flooded in, each one meticulously followed up by the determined detective and his team. And then, buried in the mountain of information, a name emerged, a name that sent shockwaves through the investigation. The killer was not a stranger, nor a former employee. He was someone hiding in plain sight, connected to the case in a way no one had anticipated. As Violetto pieced together the final parts of the puzzle, he realized the true horror of what they were dealing with. The Lane Bryant shooting was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger, more sinister plan. With this chilling realization, the race was on. Violetto knew they had to act fast before the killer struck again. As dawn broke over Tinley Park, police vehicles converged on a quiet suburban home, their sirens silent. Violetto led the team, his heart pounding as they approached the front door. This was the moment he had been working towards for so long. The door splintered under the force of the battering ram, and officers swarmed into the house, their shouts echoing through the early morning stillness. But as they searched room after room, a sickening realization set in. The house was empty, the killer gone. In the basement, they found a chilling shrine to the Lane Bryant victims, newspaper clippings, photos, and personal items stolen from the scene. Violetto stared at the faces of the women, their smiles frozen in time. He had come so close, only to have the killer slip through his fingers once again. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet street, Violetto stepped outside, his face grim. He knew that somewhere out there, the Lane Bryant shooter was watching, waiting for his next opportunity to strike. The case remained unsolved, a dark chapter in Tinley Park's history. But Violetto made a silent promise to the victims and their families. He would never stop hunting, never stop searching for the truth. One day, he vowed, justice would be served. As he drove away from the empty house, Violetto knew that the Lane Bryant shooter case would define his career and his life. The killer might have won this round, but the game was far from over. And Ray Violetto was just getting started.